that's the coolest part about starting young, is that I still feel like I feel like I'm hitting my stride in my best kind of moments and enjoying everything so much more now. I'd been signed to a record label for longer than I hadn't in life. So if I was signed when I was 14, 15 years old. So I only knew label life more than I didn't know being signed to a label. I'm on the train going over this way, and I will continue on my path to be the best version of myself every day. I think I cried a lot during that chapter. I think that I was doing the best I could. It just gets even more fun as time goes on.
Delta Goodrem, welcome to the Stella podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is lovely to have you here. You today are marking your 8th appearance on the cover of Stella.
Yay.
And yet first time in the podcast studio, first time you and I have sat down for an interview since, you may not remember this, but November 2002. Was in Melbourne. You were on Neighbours and were just preparing to release a little old song called Born to Try. And I was at a magazine at the time, so it is really lovely, and I've seen you around over the years, and of course been a privilege to have you on the cover of Stella 8 times. But first time you and me chatting in a long time.
Well, it's the perfect number. It's an octave, you know. It's like from one chapter to the next. It's an octave on the piano scale, and I'm very honoured to have been on the cover that many times with you all and collaborated throughout the years. It's always nice to have another diary, where another journal, a check-in point, where you say, let's talk about where we're at right now, where are we at now, and the different moments we've gone through. When I was coming here and I'd seen the 8 different covers that we had shared, I it's like going back in time, where I was going, oh, that was going on then, that was going on, and it's beautiful to be able to share a voice of what's happening when a season is happening in life that my life in the public eye has gone on.
It's so true. They really are little time capsule moments, because obviously the first one was late 2016 and then we're here in March 2025. So that's coming up to a decade. I'm not sure how many keys that is within an octave on the piano. I will leave that to the lyricist. But they do represent moments in your life, of course, and then also reflect moments in the wider culture. For instance, one of those covers, possibly 2, fell within COVID, and so that was reflected that it was a lot more scaled back.
And the fires. We were in Los Angeles, and it was 2020, and just before COVID had happened, and the fires had started in Australia. And I remember we did a cover from there as well together about that.
That's right. So they are these little moments like that. But more times on the cover than anyone else, which, given the big roll call of famous Australians and international superstars that have been on the cover of Stella, there really should be a prize here. But let's settle for a sparkling glass, of soft drink.
This is all I need.
A lot of sparkle.
Well, it's an honour.
You mentioned there the bushfires of Australia, and of course you spend a lot of your time in LA.
Yes.
And the whole world has been watching from afar the wildfires that absolutely wreaked havoc on LA earlier this year. In fact, not long before this episode is going to air, you were due to be headlining the NRL season launch in Las Vegas, neighbouring Las Vegas, and even that was impacted by the fallout from the wildfires a couple of months on. So obviously would love to ask you about how the community is doing and your personal connection to what happened in LA.
Of course. I mean, it really did shake the your central nervous system. That's what we kind of noticed. Like, you really felt the gravity in the air of course, of just the devastation of what was happening to families' homes and in their lives, from seeing producers that we knew who had their studios with all their collectible, collections of instruments and everything from, it was in the air. You could see the smoke across, and it was very unique experience. I'm, very grateful that our place was fine, but just to kind of feel that energy in the air was quite unnerving. It felt like you had your bags packed at the door, and we had our clothes hanging ready to go, and there was one day where there was some alerts that kept going out accidentally, which was shaking my
That's
system.
good for the nervous system, isn't it?
And there was one at 4 a.m. that I woke up and I was, you had to just be on guard and be alert. And I'm grateful that the rains have come now, and it'll be on the rebuild.
That's the thing, I think in Australia, because we are a country that is beset by natural disasters, and there is a real resilience. Nature is incredibly resilient, and then we as people are incredibly resilient. I imagine it's going to be so interesting to see that community, which is obviously in a lot of people's minds, it's like a fantastical part of the world. It's something that they see in old movies and on TV during award season. It's hard sometimes to relate that there are real people living real lives there, and I think something like this has really brought that home to people.
And like you're saying, there's it brings out the best and the worst sometimes, and you see the butterfly effect of what happens and the knock-on of every single aspect of the city in that moment, and it's just it is when there's a rhythm, there's a wonderful rhythm of the arts there, and that's why you're there, and you're able to be with your kindreds in collaborating. I was in the studio in January. I was there straight away. It was my window to start making the new music before we started the shows, and I was just I was at my piano writing very different music than I was expecting, because you were writing from a place of just, oh my goodness, this just feels so heavy and natural. It was, life moments.
Yes, well, you have had many life moments and many moments where you have worked your way through different chapters, and you'll be revisiting one of those on stage soon. 2 years ago, you toured your debut album, Innocent Eyes. There was a sellout tour around the country. I can't believe that you are here revisiting Mistaken Identity. That was released the day before your 20th birthday. How has it been?
My goodness.
Going back and reflecting.
When you put it like that.
When you put it like that.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
That doesn't feel like a reality for me, but it feels like it was another lifetime. I found going into these anniversary shows just so special, like beyond very healing, very I think being able to go back in time and listen to the albums from a place of where I am right now has been quite eye-opening again, to go, wow, on this particular album, for example, on Mistaken Identity, it's quite intricate in the details of piano. I think after the first album, they just let me run riot on my piano. When I was revisiting, I'm going, it's a little more complex than I remember. And going into, I'm like, we've got a bit of work cut out for us to put this show together, because there's so many chord changes. But I think from my life being like, songwriting was my blood, and I loved expressing myself that way, and I was very open. And I realized when I kind of go into those albums how open-hearted and minded I was when I broke into music. And I think it's kind of going into them is reminding me to work harder to get back to that again, to being able to be as open as that in my sort of having to protect yourself from being, sort of in the music, in the industry, my whole entire life. And it's been really, there's just reasons you go back into it, and getting to play the album from top to bottom and being able to play songs that we didn't get to play back then. And it's just really exciting. It's enjoyable. It's a really creative project to do. And there's so much in that album and the first album. I can see the journey. So I'm really enjoying this kind of format. The first one was so much fun. Innocent Eyes anniversary, we've done around the whole country. This one is just one-off shows in Australia and in the UK. And yeah, my heart kind of just smiles and beams when I think of it. It was everybody else's album as well, and it wasn't just mine. And that was really awesome to sort of experience.
It certainly felt like it really was everyone else's album.
Yeah.
And because, as you say, going back to that time capsule, whether it's stellar covers or your albums, obviously Innocent Eyes, that was your breakthrough in the industry. I was just referencing the first time we met, when you're pivoting from that career as an actor, and then the journey that you had gone on, even in those couple of years as still as a teenager. Yeah. And then,
but when you say that, I don't remember ever being a teenager in that time, where I kind of go, I was, because I always had my friends from school, and I always still remember having playful, childlike fun throughout the course of my life still. But I also kind of, when you say it, I can't in my mind, I think I always felt a little bit older than what I was. Now I'm reverting back, I think hopefully. But it's hard to fathom when you say that of when my mind goes back to what was happening in my life at that time.
I can completely understand that, because so much had happened to you at such a young age. I mean, professionally and personally. And that's why I mentioned that the Mistaken Identity album was released the day before your 20th birthday, because that is a very, very young person. You were literally a teenager up until that moment. So the whole writing and producing the first album, the touring that, the huge success of that, and then recording and writing and releasing the second album, all of that happened before you were even 20. We even got to 21 yet.
I know. Have you got to my 21st at the State Theatre where my mum got mad at me because I'd missed the harpist that was there before I got there. I remember 1920 and I did my first tour, my first big tour, and it was an arena tour. And it was on that album, on The Mistaken Identity with Visualize. And I just remember being in Newcastle, I think it was, and we'd had this sort of the kabuki drop. I was learning all the different fun, that live aspects, because touring is, it was always my dream. When I was going through my battle, I would imagine these moments on the shows that I would get to do. Like, what would Predictable be played like? How will we do Electric Storm on stage? And I remember being there, being there at my first arena show of my first headline, and I was the first Australian to open Kudos Bank Arena. And it was 20,000 people, and I just remember shaking like a leaf. I remember standing there. I had my hand up in, a high position and just being like, oh my goodness, the feeling of like I was, like a parachute, like I was jumping, like, we're on the plane, you got to jump now, you have nowhere else to go, you have to go. And that was my first like live show, my own show. Then it was, but of course, over the course of time, it just even gets more fun. That's the coolest part about starting young, is that I still feel like I feel like I'm hitting my stride in my best kind of moments and enjoying everything so much more now. But I love going back in time and sharing those lightning in a bottle moments from a different place of what that was like.
And obviously your fans and the audience, when you're there performing, are also revisiting where you were at your life at that stage, but also where they were, and that's how art works.
And I always, that was always something that was a part of how I got into it. I didn't get into it for anything, but I loved connection and storytelling, and I didn't have like a, it's a new culture now with fame and all those kind of things, but my love was seeing that somebody took a song and made it a part of their core memory of their life. They can go back in time. And when we were doing the Innocent Eyes tour, I could see when we'd like play Not Me Not I or something, and you could see people taking their own story and like seeing their own life come back to them as they're sitting there from a place of putting the CD player on. And it also happens to me, and with Mistaken Identity, I've been going through the same process. And maybe because it was a complicated time as well, I am enjoying it as like a listener and dissecting it from a different place.
Well, can I ask you then a little bit about that complicated time, which was at the height of the success of the release of the previous album, Innocent Eyes, in 2003. You were diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the release of Mistaken Identity came really when, again, you look at that 20 years ago, what an astounding achievement to have gone through a really grueling treatment of radiation and chemotherapy.
I think there was, being a feeler and someone who'd come from writing an album from an innocent place, like from a wide-eyed writing songs about time and life and being born to try, or those kind of that ethos in that writing. Then I was discovering many different musicians, because my household didn't have a lot of like my parents listened to about 3 albums. It was like Jive Bunny, Joe Cocker and John Farnham. And so when we hit the second album, I think I'd seen life in a very different way as well. I'd started to discover Tori Amos and Stevie Nicks, and all of a sudden my eyes had opened to Annie Lennox, and all of a sudden there was all these new influences that I just didn't have on the first album. So I was exploring that sort of intensity from that place, because whilst it was a triumphant moment to obviously stand there as a walking through and being thankful to be a survivor, I had to walk from a different place as well of what do I feel now going into this? How can I be of service now to be able to do good with other people that are going through it? And even just yesterday I was on the plane, and this gentleman behind me had said that he was coming in for a stem cell treatment, and he'd straight away opened, and I get to hear everybody's stories throughout the course of my life since that day. Every single day that someone shares a story with me about their own journey, about that's what they've gone through or their friend has gone through. So in that respect, I look at it like that is a triumph, and that so many people have shared, so many beautiful stories with me of their strength that we can kind of come together on, and there's no wall there's no wall between us in like talking about what it is to have the courage to walk through when you're not feeling as brave as what you would like to in those moments. And I think that's been pretty amazing, and I'm thankful that the last few years we've worked hard at building my foundation now, and that came from that moment. So I think in that aspect, yes, that's the triumph.
That's right. I mean, initiatives like the Delta Goodrem Foundation, and the fact that I do know even firsthand that you do spend a lot of time speaking to other survivors and cancer patients. Actually, if you don't mind me telling this story, because this was off behind the scenes. I mean, this was not anything that played out in public. A good family friend of mine, about 8-9 years ago, the daughter was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. She was a huge fan of yours. She'd gone to a signing in the shopping centres. Remember that when they were big things? Spent a lot of time there, yes. Yeah, absolutely did.
I think I met most of Australia. Yes.
Absolutely. And I remember this person had reached out to me and said, look, I'm not sure if you know Delta Goodrem, but do you think she might consider talking to my daughter? And you did. And that happened on the phone, and you gave her about an hour of your time. And look, a really sad footnote to that story was that she did pass away later that year. And I did actually let you know, and you actually wrote a really beautiful card to her mother. So again, I mean, I'm telling this story without warning, but the reason I'm saying is because I know that there are things that sometimes you're reluctant because it is authentic and genuine, and I know you don't want people to think that that's something that you're doing for publicity, because we do live in a culture where people always like to assign the most uncharitable motives to other people. You must look back and think the empathy and the way that experience has shaped you, and the way that you've wanted to give so much of your time and do initiatives like the Delta Goodrem Foundation. Do you think that would have happened without that experience?
No, I think my heart would have always wanted to, if something's come into your life, to make good of it for other people as well. Like that was a part of me. But no, I wouldn't have been in this moment of the Delta Goodrem Foundation, or have had that experience to talk from a place. So you're right. I look at it like, much like when Olivia had sent me a note saying, one day you'll understand that it's a gift to be able to have this understanding for people. And at the same time, it's been a lot of conversations, but people go through so much every single day. And it's a long time ago for me now, but I've had so many different trials. What's trials by fire?
Trials by fire.
Different over the years. But that sort of connection that bonded a lot of people with me and me with them, of that music and life was, cancer doesn't discriminate, and it can just, you have to stay on top of your health. It's number one. All those life messages that might at times feel cliche or earnest in songs or in conversation. They're not, because when someone's going through something really real and going through a moment in their life, those are those simple messages. Like Fighter, Christina Aguilera was on my playlist. Like, it's as obvious as that sometimes. And so in that respect, I'm really proud to be able to work with like St. Vincent's, and from that day I'm a very loyal person, so hence here we are 8 covers later. I'm very ride or die as a character as it is, and once I love people, I very much love people, and like that I would do anything for the people I love. But the second that they had saved my life, I of course forevermore was like, what can I do? How can I be of service? And when COVID happened, it finally gave us the time to be able to go, okay, so how do I set this up properly? Because I'm a big believer in, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I don't like to do anything without a purposeful reason or without a meaning of doing it the best way I can, because I think to be in this spot even 20 or more years later, it's because I think the people who are a part of my community, or they know that I would never not put my heart and soul into anything I'm involved in. I just wouldn't do it otherwise. So.
It's nice to know that was another silver lining of COVID. We're getting a few silver linings that came out. The birth of the foundation was one of them. Delta, I wanted to talk to you about the release of Mistaken Identity and what your memories are of that time. Out of the Blue was the debut single, and as we've touched upon, there was so much interest and fascination, and everyone really did feel like they were rallying for you, and that is not hyperbole.
No.
When you would even be walking red carpet, people would stop. It was like people were talking to Australia's daughter or something like that, you know. And of course, no one person can actually be the aunt or the daughter or the son.
But do you know what that? Can I share with you? My mum had lost her parents young, and so we didn't get to grow up with them. And one day my mother said she had like a moment, and she got a bit teary, and she said, "I wish that my mum and dad were here to be able to share, life moments together." And I said, "Don't worry, Mum." I've said, besides them being above watching, you've got many aunties and uncles in Australia here. Right. We're like, we can look at that gentleman that came and chatted to us there. Let's consider him an uncle, an auntie, a sister, a brother. And I have felt that connection, and I don't take it for granted that is. I feel it though. I don't know when. I feel like sometimes my space invading, sometimes when people like just jump into conversation with me and go, "Delta, so at this time, and I just jump straight in, and I'm like, is it me who's like a bit out there where I'm like, yes, I know. I feel like I know everyone as much as they feel me in those energies, not everybody, because obviously there's not going to be, everyone has their own worlds going on, but people who have chosen maybe, and we've had a connection in some moment or another, when we have that interaction, I normally feel just as connected as if I've watched their life too. It's a very strange feeling, and I'm not sure if that how to explain that.
That actually makes perfect sense. It really does, and it's such a great insight into what I think in current parlance would be the parasocial relationship, which is where a person really identifies or feels like they know someone, a public figure or someone that they know. But
it also works the other way.
I love that.
I feel that I know them.
That. But as I said, when the album came out, there was a lot of expectation, a lot of love, a lot of people really rallying behind you, as you talked about, the whole country of extended family for you and for your mum and your own family.
Yes.
And then did that also then bring with it a sense of pressure? Because the expectation on any follow-up album, when it's on the heels of something as supernova as Innocent Eyes was, already brings acute pressure and expectation. But then, as discussed, you're only 19, about to turn 20. You've been through this incredibly confronting, life-challenging experience at every single level. Physically, you've obviously temporarily lost your hair as a result of the chemotherapy treatment. So all of that, can I ask you about that side of the experience when Mistaken Identity was released?
I mean, which part would you like to dive into? Because there's so much in that chapter, and there was, we had just broken in the UK. Elton John had called me on the first day of my chemo. It was then I was back out in the world and just trying to kind of, as a teenager, try to navigate. And I think everyone cared so, as in like our team and my, I was with the record labels, and it was a totally different time of life, and as a culturally speaking as well, when it came to how music was run. And I mean, I just remember it being, it was, I guess the words that come to mind, and I'll keep exploring it as I'm putting the show together, because it's definitely a deep dive. But I still remember being able to be an artist in the sense that I would sort of go and escape to songwriting, like songs like Fragile, and you can hear what's happening in my mind on that album. That's how I can kind of go back in time as well, because a lot of it I also block out to kind of move on from, because I had become intense tabloid conversation, and that's something that nobody teaches you when you first get into it. That was my first intense tabloid. I mean, paparazzi were chasing on the street. I'd be in the UK, and it was, the bikes on the side, and people were everywhere. And when it came to the music side, I can hear how expressive I was it's a full-bodied musical, like me and Guy Chambers in London, and Billy Mann, and we'd done like big orchestras in it. So I can feel the want to just be, its mood is intense, like the analyst. I go into that song and I'm like, free her mind, she's always the analyst, silent space, the culprit, the catalyst, trying to make sense of this life. And I can hear my analytical side kind of stepping in, and that's why I put it at track 2. Is it the best pop song on the album? No, but it had a message of what I was experiencing. And you go from the long-haired, no-shoed, piano playing to all of a sudden a totally different identity, which is where that sort of the title came from. And you're questioning just everything. And I think putting the pieces together from like a family side, from a music side, and choices. And I think that it was a pretty, there was a lot of pressure to answer in my roundabout way. There was a lot of pressure. And I think I cried a lot during that chapter. I think that I was doing the best I could, but it was intense. It was an intense time.
Yeah, it must be such a intense experience, to use the same word, to go back and revisit that particular chapter. I would imagine doing so with innocent eyes was really eye-opening,
like dreamscape,
and profound.
And very. Then, but again, I'm sitting here with going, wow, what an experience of life. That was another true experience to the colours of the rainbow. There is a depth and gravity that I can understand from a place. I'm always somebody who, when they go through anything, I will take with me what I need to learn from and continue to try to learn, and I will discard and just keep moving forward. I'm on the train going over this way, and I will continue on my path to be the best version of myself every day. And that might have been an intense album, but I think in rediscovering and going to, and again, I say that as an album, as a life moment. But there was a lot of amazing moments. I was there doing Top of the Pops, and we were in New York, and we were doing the Today Show, and we were doing, there was a lot of amazing moments that were happening with Out of the Blue. Almost Here had taken off in Europe, and we were flying from country to country, but it was still just, I was just a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, and a lot of it I'm still trying to remember.
So that's right. That's why I'm here to give you a little specific. Oh wow, remember that
I remember
moment.
Some bad fashion choices. I'm going to be honest with you on that.
No, never. How could you possibly be in the public eye for 22 years and have bad fashion choices? Never happened before.
I can safely say to you that I remember when I think it was a couple of years ago when we were, one of my girlfriends said, and I said, I really didn't like this outfit I was wearing, and I got papped out there. Before, now phones were a little bit more of the prevalent. Now I've just given up in any pride. It's fine. Here I am. But I was like, I just like the outfit. And she said, oh, babe, don't worry, it can't be anything as bad as what you were wearing in 2004 and 5. And I was like, well, I guess you're right. So this looks good then. There you go.
I love that supportive feedback.
I was like, you know what? Yeah, the outfit's not that bad then, is it?
Well, it's true. It goes to the theme of resilience, doesn't it? You learn, you go, okay, I can get back from these bad outfits, whatever it is, and then you learn.
I had some good ones, but just some of them,
you certainly had a few. It wouldn't be a life if there weren't like a few bad wardrobe choices. I think I speak for all of us when I say that. Part of the reason that a second album brings all of that weight of expectation I was talking about is because really, and I think we can talk about this 20 years later. I wouldn't, if I was sitting in the studio, I wouldn't say it now, right? Okay, Delta, this is make or break. So right now, you've got this a massive career, but if this one's a fizzer, people are going to go, oh, that was a one-hit wonder. So that's the spoiler alert. I think 20 years later we can say, well, that was the next step, the next chapter in what has clearly been not only a very successful career, but a career with longevity in it.
I can safely say that even I didn't feel that. I didn't have that kind of feeling when it came to, I wasn't sort of, and I still don't, when it comes to, oh, if this doesn't, work, or my pursuit is to do great work, great projects, great people. I didn't have that feeling on album 2, like if this doesn't work, anything. No, I would just sort of pick up and keep going and find, okay, well, let me dive deeper into sitting at my piano and finding what I want to share and talk about. But again, it's for people to pick up a part of them. So I didn't feel that kind of pressure. It was more that there was just an enormity going on around me. It was a coming from Innocent Eyes into that record, when you're doing, I think for some reason comes to mind being at the Arias and singing Out of the Blue, and just the amount of production and just things that were going on was kind of what had happened next. And
the scale
of
it. As you say, you're traveling the world and you're doing live TV in New York.
And you don't look the same or you don't feel the same. So you're trying to navigate that whilst a lot of people are dissecting you and trying to put observations or... But again, I that was then. And I kind of... I appreciate that that's what was going on in that moment.
As you said, there were some parts of that chapter then were your first experience of that really unrelenting paparazzi interest and everyone following everything that you did. And then you've already touched upon it, I think, before you said trial by fire, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you have really ridden the roller coaster of the public eye, like the highest of highs and then inevitably the lowest of lows. Everyone that has got any career that probably even honestly goes longer than a week is going to feel the absolute love and then the absolute venom, and you have really experienced the absolute extremities of it. How do you feel about that looking back now? Do you feel like could anything shock you in terms of people saying bad things about you, because you have not weathered it, but also those things must presumably sting when you're younger, but also when it's your first time being exposed to that?
Well, that's the thing. I think when you're first exposed to it and then you're sort of getting the muscles of understanding of how to put the umbrella up and walk through it and then put it down. But again, with a true intention and a clear intention, then I knew that this too will pass. And then you also have to understand that's a career. You can't always be one thing to everybody or a hero or a villain. You will in a career go through different ebbs and flows like any job. That's all you can do.
Absolutely, and that's the thing, and you learn that each time that you do get back up and get on with it, and then you learn that
I don't really read or look at anything though anymore now. Like I definitely, like when I was younger, I would see a lot more. I probably have to be, if something comes up, I might say you better show me, but I don't read or look at anything about myself. I live my life. I have an amazing partner in my life, and we live a good life, and we get to tour the world doing what we love to do and meeting great people.
Well, that's a nice segue, because I was going to ask you about current day life, and because I know we've spoken a lot. I was going to ask you about turning 40, actually.
Yes.
You have obviously gone and revisited 2 albums on a successful tour. Is this something that you think you might do for every single album that you're going to do? Do you think you might put them all together at some point?
Do an anniversary of every album?
Yes.
Well, I'm really enjoying it. So, but it is about the new music. I am absolutely in the studio at the moment. Hence why I didn't do the tour, because I was like, I need to keep writing the new music. I feel like I just love the new songs so much. So I'm definitely very ready for the new songs to start to make their way out into the world soon. But first steps first right now with these shows, committing and then heading to London with them. So, but yes, I you know, if it's so much fun playing an album from top to bottom, from a time when now you skip a lot more and you might have singles, but in, you know, having each album playing top to bottom, who knows? I mean, I hadn't thought about the next one yet. We've had so many projects go on. I haven't got to that.
I obviously would love to ask you about your record label. You have your own record label now. Tell me about that. What inspired you to do that, and what are your plans for it as a record label?
Well, I'd been in signed to a record label for longer than I hadn't in life. So if I was signed when I was 14, 15 years old. So I only knew label life more than I didn't know being signed to a label. And then COVID really did change a lot. I think it had like that sort of propeller on people where the different life moments. We just had Bridge Over Troubled Dreams, the album, go #1, and we worked really hard as a team. And I just remember feeling that sense of understanding how much the world was changing and how much I'd learned. I was doing these bunker down sessions on my socials, and just, you know, obviously because when we were at home and we kept doing the music, but we started to see how much the communication was happening now. And I was learning how to use my phone, how to be connected through our phones and be able to, and I understood how quick everything was. And I think that I started to see that there was a new model that was out there and a different way, rather than just accepting an old path that had sort of been there was an evolution. And I enjoyed the creative aspect of that. We were starting to have a lot of fun with my creativity, being able to be out of the box with doing projects, making Christmas shows and I really relish in sort of creating a project. And I just had a feeling in my heart that, you know, things were changing, and I felt like I wanted to be able to move into the new era in a new way and see how I could efficiently be able to create and be with a core team, and that kind of just that evolution. And I think there was an opening there where there was a change of guards and change of season when it came to even with The Voice and with the label and everything. And I just sort of said, I want to go over here. And I have been walking a path that, you know, for me has been less traveled, but it's been exciting. We've been able to tour the world with Backstreet Boys and Shania, and it just, I'm really proud of the last 4 years. And starting the label felt like a natural thing when you've been in label your whole life, and now there's a new version of that I feel strong about being able to create for the next gen as well.
Yeah, it must be quite an adjustment then, going from being part of a label for, as you say, most of your conscious life, and then all of a sudden hadn't really thought about it from that outside of the work aspect, just part of the identity. Something that we talk about a lot, women on this podcast, is the changing nature of visibility of women and just the options that are open to women as they get older. If you look back, you know, even only 10, 20 years ago, it was like, right, you're this age, that's what it means. Certainly I've had women in here in their 50s and 60s. For you, only being 40 is obviously a younger lens on it, but it's the same thing, I would imagine, when you look at the women that you were looking to in the public eye when you were growing up, and also just personally your mum's generation. The old labels and barriers that were so commonplace don't seem to be in place anymore.
I know. What an exciting time for us to be able to have that. I recognize that's it's so fantastic. It's so wonderful to be able to, it's time. There's no, you should timeless, where whenever your time is, there's no, I wrote a song on my first record in my own time. And I do truly believe that your timing is right for you. And, I have things that I would have thought on different times in my life, but I love that my time is on my own time. And I think that how fantastic that society has shifted to where, there is no limit on you. You can be whatever you want to be at any age. You go for it, and lifting each other up in that space and celebrating that the different chapters of your life and being able, that's so cool. That's really awesome.
Can I ask, Delta, when going back to your treatment, and we just talked about that period of your life after the diagnosis with Hodgkin's lymphoma, a question that all women in the public eye is also asked about, so what are you doing to look good, and how are you feeling today, and are you looking, do you want to wear this dress, and that scrutiny and pressure. Going through that life challenging experience, did that put the physical side of things into perspective a little bit for you in terms of the mortality aspect of this conversation that, again, I think all of us grapple with? If you hadn't had that formative experience.
Truthfully, I wish I'd worked harder at having more emphasis sometimes. I never had it as my my first step. I didn't, whilst I'm so grateful to have hair and makeup when it came to doing my job or feeling the best I could, it wasn't, I think that, I was pretty, I loved coming up with what outfit am I wearing on stage. That would be a passion, but it wasn't I've never really had that passion for day to day, where I think that might be a misconception maybe for me. I don't really, I don't have a excitement of what I'm going to wear for this today, as in day to day. But I love when it's theatrical or stage or, what we're going to do that meets that performance. No one ever really, I don't think for me in my journey, when people talk about, did someone say wear this or wear that? I've always been very strong-minded as well. I'm not that person that, whilst I'm open and I'm always best idea in the room wins. Best thought process and our friction makes motion. Best thought that we move forward to be able to get the best solution wins. When including does this look great? Does this look great? I love that aspect, but I'm not. I guess it's a lot more prevalent now with people with their social media and their phones and that but that wasn't really a passion. And you'd see for me, I'm a little more shy when it comes to, I want to look the best I can. And at times I'll notice, I better get running a bit more. I bet, but I'm a lot more driven from a different place. That's not.
Yeah. No, it's a miracle. It makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a really fascinating answer, because really the question was me querying whether your attitude to the sea that we all swim in, whether you're in the public eye or not,
totally.
Whether you are 20, whether you're 40, whether you whatever,
at school, whether you're anywhere now.
All women know. There's that moment where everyone goes, well, what are you wearing, or what do you look like, or oh, you look too young, or you look too old, or oh, you need to put on weight. Oh no, you've lost too much weight. It is a very general cultural part, I would argue, of being a woman. And I was curious whether that experience of losing your hair temporarily at 20, whether that had shaped it. But what I'm hearing is that for you, it was always more, the physicality and fashion was more part of storytelling for you. Yeah.
I love that dress over jeans. I was very casual about the way I approached. I loved something that I looked nice, or this looks nice. It was very natural, organically. I didn't use it as my number one thought process of what am I going to wear for this. But then when I went through losing my hair and losing you are inflamed from the different steroids or all those kind of things that are going on, or your eyebrows have gone grey because that's just what happens. So yes, and then I had braces at the time too because my teeth was moving. So it was definitely, I definitely then got, definitely wanted to sort of hermit a little bit more. But I think I have hermited a lot when I just need to kind of recover or, but then sort of, then my hair was coming back and I just, it was just not, I wasn't rocking it at all. And I appreciate, when we get dressed up and play. But if you caught me at home, I'm very tracksuits at home.
You are engaged and you share parts of your life, like your engagement on social media, but then are also very private. And again, from an outsider perspective, it doesn't look like there's any tussle about that.
No.
I'm sure people are asking you questions, or fans all the time, but from a public perspective, it looks like people give you the space at this point in your life to live your life, but then you're also not, it's not a secret. Is that a fair observation?
100%. I think that's exactly what it is. I feel when we got engaged, it was the day before that we shared the photo before we were on stage, and I was tussling so bad in that moment, but I was like, we just share it, and then it was kind of like during that tour, it was so beautiful because each place would say, happy engagement. It felt like we'd done an engagement party in every single city while we were doing those shows. And I thought that was just so beautiful in the way that we got to kind of share that in our own way, which was we're open on stage. We're on stage together. We are there. And it is, it is also a love language for us, is being up there. But I do love keeping us as a sacred house too. And that's important for me. And I choose, it's like the same with my family. I choose to stand in my authentic self with my love for music and my love for the arts, or doing shows and projects. But he chooses music as well. So that's a form, but he doesn't choose this, or my brother doesn't. My mum, dad don't. And I kind of have learnt that from over time, and that's what works for me.
Absolutely. And I think it's obvious that that has been learnt, because there are some things in life that you can only get that balance when you've lived through it.
Totally.
There's no rule book to that.
But that's what I'm saying about life. I really, this is such a wonderful chapter, because all those different moments that lead you to where you are, where you go, you can kind of find those boundaries which are right for you. And that doesn't mean things won't change over time, but I feel, I enjoy where we're at with sharing my other parts of me.
Final question. Can I just go back where we started when we were talking about the 8 stellar covers, and you were only so young at the time. I mean, if you hadn't been in the industry, you would have still been possibly at school, maybe. Like, you might have been finishing up year 12 in that November.
I would have been in year 12. I didn't do year 11 and 12, yeah. I was on Neighbours.
I've taken you back a lot, but I would like just to end on that moment. If you look back to that Delta Goodrem back then, end of 2002, before publicly at least everything changed with Born to Try being released, what would you say to her? Is if you had to give her one piece of advice, or one observation, or one joke or something, what do you think you'd say?
Give her some good jokes for the stage.
Absolutely.
Listen, I mean, I think it's just, I would also say staying strong in, what's important as you, I don't know if what I find is that to separate from so much noise, you have to have those quiet moments to be able to really hear the voice within, to be able to stay strong. And I think in the moments of when you have maybe not the best people around you, or there can be so much influences and noises and this and this and this. I think always removing yourself and taking a moment to really sit in what is you are the sort of North Star of this whole ship. How do you kind of go forward in the right way? I think I would always just say, just keep, if a reflective side, I'd say, just always keep, making sure you find those quiet times by yourself to be able to always step back into that. But otherwise, I just also tell her that it just gets even more fun as time goes on and you're about to experience a wild ride. But always remember what you got into it for, and the intention and the ethos of the love and light through song and shared experience as humans. Yeah.
Well, Delta, it's been really lovely to chat to you. Happy belated 40th birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
And looking forward to seeing you on stage. You can see Delta Goodrem, Mistaken Identity. A night of celebration is on the 14th of April at the Sydney Opera House. Tickets available through deltagoodrem.com. We'll have a link in the show notes. Of course, you're performing in London as well. I mean, when you look back at, you were talking earlier about shaking with nerves before you went out at the stadium.
Now I'm like standing there like counting down to go out. I'm like, let's go. We put on a bit of AC/DC and we go.
Oh, do you play some AC/DC?
Yes.
There's
a lot more boys in the band than there is just me. So there's a little bit of Aussie rock that stays with us when we're away from Australia. So
I love that.
Thunderstruck and we head out.
I love it. And literally on that note of Thunderstruck, we will wrap up. Delta, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.